Hi and welcome to the channel. My name's Alan aboard the Bubbly Too. This is going to be a slightly different video than normally my cruising videos. One of the questions I've got asked a great deal since I bought Bubbly Too was, why live on a narrowboat? Why go onto a narrowboat and live full time? And also the pros and cons. What are the pros, what are the cons of living on board a narrowboat full time? So because it's a popular question, I thought I'd spend a little bit of time trying to explain it from my point of view. What I've found since I bought Bubbly Too, the pros and the cons, a little bit about why I went and bought a boat in the first place, and hopefully that will give you some idea and answer the questions I've been asked. So hope you enjoy this short video. Okay, so before we carry on, just to say I've made myself some notes here so I can try and remember everything I want to say, so please forgive me if I'm looking away from the camera a bit. I've got notes on the computer that I'm looking at as well. So okay, so first let me try and give you a little bit of an insight as to why I came to buy Bubbly Too. I think it's fair to say that for most of my life I've been a wanderer. I've always been keen to find out what's around the next corner. I was always a bit of a black sheep, always off doing my own thing and one thing and another. And that's really continued throughout my whole life. In fact, for most of my adult life, or from late teens onwards, really, nearly 20, I've had a camper van of some description. Started off with the old hippie buses and progressed from there. And that's been something, as I said, that's been with me throughout most of my life. So I decided that I would take to the camper van full-time, motorhome full-time, which in fact is what I did. And so from the end of 2009 through to the beginning of this year, I lived full-time on the road in a camper van. Fantastic experience. Traveled to many countries. In fact, I think my total so far, not all in a motorhome, it's got to be said, or a camper van, but it's about 70 countries. So I'm what you would call pretty well traveled. But to be honest, I got to the point when I came back earlier this year from Spain, Portugal, Morocco, etc., thinking, where do I go now? Because I'd got to a situation where I'd travelled through every country in Europe. And so really basically all I was doing is going around in circles. So if you add to that the restrictions that came about as a result of Brexit. Now, prior to Brexit, I could spend 11 months of the year outside the UK, no problems at all, come back and forward as I wanted to. Since Brexit, we've been limited to this 90-day in any 180-day period. So I decided that I needed a change. Now, many years ago, I had a narrowboat for a short period of time. Really enjoyed it. So I decided, well, that's a good idea. I quite fancy the idea of living on a narrowboat again. So I started to look around without going into all the details, which I'll probably do in another video at some stage, exactly how I found Bubbly Too. But I found Bubbly Too, put an offer in, which was accepted, and yeah, moved on board. This was about 6 months ago, and yeah, I've been really happy on it so far. So what are the pros and what are the cons of living on the narrowboat? Well, obviously, one of the main things, I suppose, really is that you wake up every day to scenic views. You've got beautiful views of the canals, the rivers, the nature, wherever you might be, and obviously there's constantly changing scenery. Also the mobility. Now, narrowboats are designed for navigation on canals and rivers, obviously, and that allows you to explore different regions and towns throughout the waterway network without the need for a car. And it's a floating home you can basically take wherever you want to go. So if you do come along and moor up and you don't really quite like where you are, or for whatever reason, you can just literally untie and move on and find somewhere different. So that's a great pro as far as the narrowboats are concerned. Simplicity. Living on a narrowboat forces you really to downsize, yeah, and live a much simpler life. It's a far more minimalist lifestyle. You haven't got the room to hoard and carry all and get all the bits and pieces you would do in a normal home. I think that's a good idea and I think it's a good thing, but not everyone can really take that on board. Because you have to be selective in what possessions you keep, it can be quite liberating for some people to do that. As far as the community is concerned, I found, and I found this in the past, that the boat life community is amazing. They'll share their love of the canals with you. They're friendly, they're open, they'll help you. There's really, yeah, in my opinion, it's a far closer, tight-knit community than is the way with camper vans and motorhomes, particularly over the last couple of years or so. So that is something that I really do enjoy. As far as the costs are concerned, with the cost-effective ways of that, it means that in most cases, living on a narrowboat can be more affordable, obviously, than a traditional house. You're going to be saving on the rent, you're going to be saving on a mortgage if you have a mortgage, and obviously things like council taxes and utilities, which doesn't mean obviously that living on a narrowboat is completely free. And we still have to pay the CRT, the Canal and River Trust, a licence fee each year, and we have to have the boat insured, but it's certainly nowhere near as expensive as living on, or in, should I say, a normal house. And then I suppose the last pro really, or the main pro, is the environmental impact. Narrowboats are relatively eco-friendly compared with normal housing. They require a lot less energy to heat and to cool, and they have a much lower carbon footprint. Now, you know, some people find it quite strange that one can say that, because most narrowboats, their heating is from fossil fuel, it's from coal and wood. A narrowboat is a relatively small area to heat, and so, you know, it's not too bad at all from that point of view. So those are the real pros, I suppose, as far as living on a narrowboat is concerned, as far as what I've found. Let's look then at some of the cons. Well, I suppose one of the main cons of living on a narrowboat, and that it's going to depend obviously on the size of narrowboat that you've bought. Now, my Bubbly Too is 46 foot long, which for me on my own is ideal. It's an ideal space. And when you bear in mind that most things, as far as narrowboats are concerned, your license fee, for example, they're all based on the length of your boat. As far as the limited space is concerned, stating the obvious, a narrowboat is narrow. Yeah, so you've got a lot more limited living space and the storage, and it can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. It's not an ideal way of living for those who need a lot of personal space. I mean, that assumes you're not travelling alone like I am. Then you've got the maintenance side. Now, as far as maintenance is concerned, boats do require regular maintenance, and this can be a time-consuming and potentially costly exercise. One of the things that you have to do is to have the boat taken out of the canal every 2, say 3 years, to have the bottom blacked. This is a process where it stops the underside of the boat on the sides, the lower sides of the boat, from corroding. So you have to have it black. Now, in order to do that, you've got to have it taken out of the water. To have the boat taken out of the water and black can be, you know, quite expensive depending on the process. You could be talking £800,000 from that sort of point of view. Also, as far as routine maintenance is concerned, you've got to keep on top of it. It's not something you can just leave and then, you know, when it goes wrong, fix it. You've got to keep on top of the maintenance. So there's costs involved in that sort of thing as well. And it's often said that boat actually stands for bring out another 1,000. It does seem true sometimes. In my experience, I found that if you wanted to buy anything for a piece of equipment, this is, or an internal piece, for a motorhome or a camper van, it was probably double, at least, if not a lot more, than what you would buy something of the same type of thing for a home, a normal house. If you want to buy that same thing for a boat, you could almost double it again. Yeah, so just to give you some idea, when I bought the boat, it had a 3-way fridge on board, a small 3-way fridge, quite a small fridge, 80 litres I think, and it was faulty, unfortunately, and so needed replacing. I looked online to try and find, you know, a replacement, which I did. It was a Dometic. It was a fridge with a small freezer box. It was £1,300+. This thing was really quite small, and when you consider you can go into you know, electrical domestic appliance store and buy a huge, great American style fridge for your house for 300, 400 pounds. It gives you some idea. I, in the end, bought a 12-volt fridge, which is basically a domestic, normal household fridge carcass, but instead of having a 240-volt motor in it, it's got a 12-volt motor in it. That was a lot less expensive and it works perfectly, so that was a great thing. But it gives you some idea. Another thing is the weather dependency. Now, obviously, a narrowboat lifestyle, particularly if you're living full time, is brilliant in the summer. So from, you know, sort of mid spring period, mid to late spring, through the summer and into the early first half of the autumn, it's fantastic. You know, you've got mild weather, not always sunshine, it's got to be said, but you've got mild weather and you can just cruise and enjoy the whole system. It's fantastic. But of course, in the winter, that's completely opposite. It can get exceedingly cold. You can be frozen into your mooring. You know, the canal will freeze over and you could be stuck there for weeks sometimes. So that's something to bear in mind, that although you can be toasty warm inside the boat because you've got the heat in the fire, the multi-fuel stove, outside it could be minus 4, 5, 6 degrees sometimes, maybe even a bit more depending on where you are in the country, which means you can get yourself iced in, and that can be difficult with regards to having to go out and get shopping and supplies and bits and pieces. So, you know, the weather is something that you've really got to consider quite seriously. Access to things like water and sewage depots, well, they can be found in regular sort of spots along the canal systems. The CRT have got various service points, and then there's marinas that you can use as well. If you want electricity, then you're going to probably have to go to a marina. There are a few long-term mooring spots that have got electric hookup, and then there's private moorings, but these can be expensive. So normally you would do without electricity, you'd have solar panels or a little generator or whatever. As far as the regulations and licenses are concerned, it depends where you are. There may be regulations and license requirements for living on a boat, and the CRT issues licenses for most canals and rivers, but there are other authorities that can charge a license fee to use some stretches of water. So although by law you must have a CRT license to be able to cruise on the rivers and the canals of the country, and this depends on the type of license you want. You can have a license for continuous cruiser, which is what I've got, but you can go to certain areas and on certain rivers or certain stretches of canal where it's not the CRT, they're actually the authority, and so you could end up having to pay more to go onto that stretch of water. Lack of stability, another con maybe. Living on the water can be less stable than living on land. You'll feel movements from the water. Every time a boat comes past, it tends to rock a little bit. And that can be a little bit disconcerting for some people. You do get used to it. So that's something to take in mind as well. And privacy. That's one of the big ones as far as a con is concerned. If you like your privacy, narrowboats are not the best idea. You're moored up on the side of the canal, and invariably you're moored up on the canal on the towpath side, which means that there's going to be always people walking up and down, dog walkers, you know, towpath walkers, etc. Other boaters coming backwards and forwards to, you know, from getting supplies and one thing and another. And of course, because you're in the water and the bank is slightly higher, people are actually looking down and looking down into the boat. So, you know, whether you're sitting there having a meal or whatever, unless you're going to close all your curtains, which rather defeats the object of all the nature around you, you are going to have the situation where people can look in at you as they walk past. So there isn't really total privacy on a narrowboat. Not so bad in the winter because obviously it gets dark and you don't need the curtains open anyway. But in the summer, when, you know, we've got these light evenings and it might be a bit chilly outside, so you're inside the boat, people can still walk past and see in. Now, another subject that seems to be a popular one within the boating community is your waste, your personal waste. On the plus side of things, on the pro side, obviously, you know, with a narrowboat you are completely self-sufficient, and yeah, that's a great thing. But the fact that you're self-sufficient means that, you know, you can't go to the toilet and pull the chain and get rid of your waste. So that's something you have to do, you know, yourself. So you'll go to the various service points and things like that. Some boats have got a pump out toilet, which means you connect the tube to it and it'll be sucked out of the holding tank. That can cost, I don't know, 15-20 pounds a time. Probably only need to do it once a month or whatever. I'm not sure, I've never had a holding tank like that. But other than that, and a lot of boats have cassette toilets, which means you've got to find an Elson point, and then you've got to literally go and dump your own waste and do the cleaning. So bear that in mind. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it needs to be done, obviously. Ultimately, whether you live on a narrowboat and find it a good choice depends on your personal preferences and your lifestyle experiences, but it's not for everyone. And it's important that if you are considering buying a narrowboat, that you really do thoroughly research it. And I would always suggest, and I'd be first to say I didn't, but I would suggest to most people that you go and have a narrowboat holiday, a week or 2 weeks or longer if you can, to gain some experience before you actually take the plunge. Because, you know, buying a narrowboat is not inexpensive. You know, you could be paying 30,000-40,000 at one end of the scale up to, well, it's almost never ending, but you know, you do see boats 150,000, even 200,000. So it's a lot of money to lay out to buy a boat, and if you're not really sure and you end up buying a boat and making a mistake, then you know it can cost you a lot of money. So I do suggest that people you know, do try it out before they actually commit to buying one. So basically they're the pros and the cons. I'm going to, in another video, go on into a little bit more of the actual living on board and a little bit more into the costs, and hopefully that will give you overall a good picture of the way things are. So thanks for watching. Hope that's answered a few of the questions as far as pros and cons are concerned with living on a narrowboat. And yeah, if anyone's got any specific questions, whatever, you know, leave a comment down in the comment section, and I'll do my best to answer them. I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to answer every question. There's lots and lots more people more experienced than me, but I'll certainly do my best and try and find you an answer wherever I can. So once again, thanks very much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. It is completely free and it would help me a great deal. Thanks again. See you on the next one.